They ruled every battle, until a single human warship changed everything. Part 1. The Unbreakable Fleet. For 500 years, no force in the galaxy had been able to stop the Vorthak Empire. Their black warships moved through space like death itself, consuming star system after star system. 847 worlds had fallen to their might. Not one had survived their assault. Not one had even damaged their fleet. The secret to their dominance was terrifyingly simple. The Vorthak didn't just build weapons, they built weapons that learned. Every battle made their ships stronger. Every defeat of their enemies taught their machines new ways to kill. Their adaptive combat systems absorbed every tactic, every strategy, every desperate move their opponents tried. Then they improved upon it, making it part of their own arsenal. Commander Vextar Quinn stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Conquest, watching the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Before them hung New Geneva, humanity's last major colony world. 3 billion human souls lived on that blue-green planet, completely unaware that their time had come to an end. Fleet status report. Vextar commanded, his 6 arms moving across the control interface with practiced efficiency. All vessels at full combat readiness, Commander, his tactical officer replied. Our adaptive systems have analyzed the complete records of every human military engagement for the past century. We know every ship design, every weapon system, every tactical doctrine they possess. Our probability calculations show complete victory with 0 losses. Vextar's insectoid features twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. The humans had fought bravely across their scattered colonies, he would grant them that. But bravery meant nothing against perfection. The Vorthak war machine had faced species far more advanced, far more numerous, far more desperate than these mammals. All had fallen. Begin the assault, he ordered. The Vorthak fleet moved forward like a living shadow. 50 capital ships, each one the size of a human city. 500 escort vessels bristling with weapons that had never failed to destroy their targets. Behind them came the planet killers, massive siege engines designed to crack worlds open. Like eggs, New Geneva's orbital defenses activated immediately. Automated weapon platforms opened fire with everything they had. Missile swarms filled the void between the fleets. Energy beams lanced out desperately, seeking to find some weakness in the approaching death. The Vorthak adaptive shields absorbed every shot. Their computers analyzed the frequency, power output, and targeting patterns of each weapon in real time. Within minutes, their systems had calculated perfect countermeasures. Return fire began, precise and devastating. One by one, the human defense platforms died. Pitiful, Vextar muttered. Did they truly believe the same weapons that failed against us at Kepler Station would somehow work here? But then, something impossible happened. A new contact appeared, on the tactical display, emerging from behind New Geneva's largest moon. It was a single ship, maybe a third the size of a Vorthak cruiser. Its design was unlike anything in their records, angular where human ships were curved, dark where they were bright, moving with a predatory grace that seemed almost alive. Unknown vessel, Vextar's communications officer announced. No match in our databases, it's broadcasting on an open channel. Let me hear it, Vextar commanded. The voice that filled the bridge was human, but there was something different about it. Calm, confident, completely unafraid, despite facing impossible odds. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Human Ship, Defiance. You have violated sovereign human space and threatened civilian populations. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The entire Vorthak bridge fell silent. Then, as one, they began to laugh. The sound was like breaking glass, harsh and sharp. One ship? One tiny unknown vessel against the greatest fleet in galactic history? Amusing, Vextar said finally. Respond with standard intimidation protocol. When they see our full strength, they will run like all the others. But the human ship didn't run. Instead, it did something no enemy had ever done before. It charged. The Defiance accelerated directly toward the center of the Vorthak formation, its engines burning with unusual intensity. Its approach vector made no tactical sense. It was heading straight into the killing field where 50 capital ships could bring all their weapons to bear. "Destroy it," Vextar ordered dismissively. The response was immediate and overwhelming. A dozen Vorthak ships opened fire simultaneously, unleashing enough energy to vaporize a small moon. The beams converged on the human vessel's position with mathematical precision, and missed. The Defiance wasn't where their targeting computers said it should be. It had twisted impossibly in space, performing maneuvers that violated every known law of physics and tactics. The ship moved like it was dancing, flowing around the energy beams like water around stones. "Impossible," Vextar breathed. "No ship can maneuver like that. The gravitational forces would tear it apart." The Defiance continued its impossible dance, weaving through weapon fire that should have ended it a dozen times over. But it wasn't just avoiding destruction. It was learning the Vorthak firing patterns, timing its movements to the rhythm of their weapons. Then it fired back. The weapons that emerged from the human ship were unlike anything the Vorthak had ever encountered. Not energy beams or missiles, but something else entirely. Streams of what looked like liquid metal flowed from the Defiance, moving with organic fluidity through space. When the strange projectiles struck the first Vorthak cruiser, they didn't explode. Instead, they seemed to burrow into the hull, spreading, like infection across the ship's surface. Within seconds, the cruiser's adaptive systems began to fail. Its shields flickered and died. Its weapons powered down. The mighty warship went dark and began to drift. "Status report," Vextar roared. "The relentless tide has lost all power," his tactical officer reported, panic creeping into his voice. "Their adaptive systems are completely offline. It's like something is eating their technology from the inside." The Defiance had already moved on to its next target. Another stream of liquid metal lanced out, striking a second Vorthak ship. The same result, complete system failure, dead in space. For the first time in 5 centuries, Vextar felt something he had never experienced before: fear. "All ships, converge on the human vessel," he commanded. "Maximum firepower. I don't care what it takes. Destroy that ship." The entire Vorthak fleet turned toward the Defiance, bringing overwhelming force to bear. The space around the human ship became a hurricane of energy and destruction. No vessel, no matter how advanced, could survive such concentrated fire. But the Defiance continued to dance. It moved through the barrage like it was choreographed, each twist and turn perfectly timed, and with every passing second, more Vorthak ships went dark, their perfect adaptive systems corrupted by the strange liquid metal weapons. "Commander," his science officer called out, terror evident in his voice. "I'm reading impossible energy, signatures from the human ship. Their reactor output is fluctuating in patterns that shouldn't be possible. It's like their entire ship is somehow alive." Vextar stared at the tactical display in growing horror. 20 ships were now dead in space. 30, 40. The pride of the Vorthak Empire was being systematically dismantled by a single human vessel that moved like no machine should be able to move. "Sir," his communications officer whispered, "we're receiving another transmission from the human ship." Captain Chen's voice filled the bridge again, still calm, still unafraid. "You came here expecting to face the same humans you've always fought. Predictable, logical, easy to counter and defeat. But you made one critical error in your calculations." On the display, another Vorthak cruiser went dark, its systems consumed by the spreading corruption. "You assumed we would fight you the same way we've always fought. You assumed we would be the same humans you've studied and cataloged and learned to defeat. But the Defiance isn't like other human ships. We don't follow your rules. We don't fight your kind of war." The human ship suddenly accelerated directly toward the Eternal Conquest, Vexatar's flagship. Dozens of weapons trained on it, but somehow every shot missed. The Defiance moved like it knew where each beam would be before it was fired. We are what happens when humans stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be impossible instead. The Defiance swept past the flagship, close enough that Vextar could see details on its hull. The ship's surface seemed to shift and flow like it was made of liquid rather than solid metal. And in that moment he understood. The humans had built a ship that was alive. Not artificial intelligence, not advanced automation, but something truly, impossibly alive. A vessel that could think, learn, and adapt faster than any computer because it didn't follow the rigid patterns of logic and programming. It followed the chaotic, unpredictable patterns of life itself. As the Defiance disappeared into the void, leaving 43 dead Vorthak ships drifting in its wake, Vextar realized that everything his species thought they knew about warfare had just become obsolete. The Dar humans had stopped trying to win by being better. They had decided to win by being different. The human solution captain Sarah Chen stood in the center of the Defiance's bridge, her hands resting on what looked like a living control console. The surface beneath her palms pulsed with a warm, organic rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Around her crew worked at stations that seemed to grow from the floor itself, their interfaces shifting and adapting to each person's unique needs. "Status report, Marcus," she called to her science officer. Dr. Marcus Webb looked up from his console, excitement gleaming in his eyes despite the dire circumstances they'd just survived. "The bio-neural integration is holding steady at 96% efficiency. The ship's consciousness is learning faster than our most optimistic projection suggested. It's not just adapting to Vorthak technology, it's understanding it on a fundamental level." Sarah nodded, feeling the subtle vibration through the deck that told her the Defiance was pleased with its performance. 3 years ago, when Earth's desperate scientists had proposed merging human consciousness with a living starship, most people had called it madness. But when faced with extinction, humanity had chosen to embrace the impossible rather than accept defeat. "Rosa, how are our biomechanical systems holding up?" Sarah asked her chief engineer. Engineer Rosa Santos wiped sweat from her forehead, her hands still deep in what looked like exposed muscle tissue rather than traditional machinery. "She's tired but stable. The liquid metal ammunition reserves are down to 40%, but the ship is already growing more. Give her another 6 hours and we'll be back at full capacity." The Defiance wasn't just alive, it was a hybrid of human engineering and something far more ancient. Deep in Earth's oceans, scientists had discovered organisms that existed in the spaces between dimensions, creatures that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. Rather than trying to understand or control them, humanity had done something typically human. They had tried to make friends. The result was the Defiance, a ship that was part machine, part living creature, and part human consciousness. It could think, feel, and make decisions that no computer could calculate. Most importantly, it could be completely unpredictable while still being utterly reliable. "Lieutenant Nakamura," Sarah called to her pilot, "how did the evasion patterns feel out there?" Kai Nakamura grinned from his position at the helm, his hands dancing across controls that responded to his thoughts as much as his touch. "Like flying through a symphony, Captain. The ship knew where the Vorthak would fire before they did. It's like she could sense their intentions through the quantum field." That was the key to their victory, Sarah realized. The Vorthak had built their entire military philosophy around perfection through adaptation. Their systems learned from every encounter, becoming stronger and more efficient with each battle. But they could only adapt to patterns they could understand. Humans, especially when bonded with quantum-dimensional organisms, didn't follow patterns. They followed intuition, creativity, and controlled chaos. They made decisions based on hunches, emotions, and pure stubborn determination. No computer could predict that, because no computer could truly understand the beautiful logic of consciousness itself. "Captain," her communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the Vorthak flagship. It's different from their usual tactical communications." "Let me hear it," Sarah said. The voice that filled the bridge was Commander Vextar Quinn's, but the arrogance was gone. Instead, there was something Sarah had never heard from a Vorthak before. Uncertainty. Human vessel defiance. "I am Commander Vextar Quinn of the Vorthak Empire. I request permission to communicate directly with your captain." Sarah raised an eyebrow. In 500 years of conquest, the Vorthak had never requested anything. They had demanded, commanded, and taken. But they had never asked. "This is Captain Chen." "You have my attention, Commander." There was a long pause before Vextar responded. "Captain Chen, in 5 centuries of warfare, no enemy has ever accomplished what you did today. Our adaptive systems are designed to counter any possible threat. Yet your ship moves and fights in ways that our computers cannot process or predict." "I must understand why. How?" Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the same mixture of exhaustion and pride on every face. They had just accomplished the impossible, but the cost had been enormous. The neural link with the ship had pushed them all to their limits. Dr. Webb was bleeding from his nose where the quantum interface had overloaded his brain. Rose's hands were raw from working with living machinery that required physical contact to repair. Kai was shaking from the neurological strain of piloting through space-time itself. But they had won. Against odds that no sane person would have. Challenged, they had won. "Commander," Sarah said finally, "the difference is that we stopped trying to be perfect. Your entire species has spent centuries perfecting the art of adaptation, building systems that learn and improve from every encounter. It's impressive, and it's made you nearly invincible." She paused, feeling the defiance pulse gently beneath her feet, encouraging her to continue. "But perfection has a weakness, Commander. It's predictable. Perfect systems respond to stimuli in perfect ways. They follow logical patterns that can be calculated and countered. We realized that to beat perfection, we had to embrace imperfection." "I do not understand," Vextar replied. "The Defiance isn't just a machine, Commander, it's alive. It has intuition, creativity, and the ability to make choices that don't follow logical patterns. When your computers tried to predict where we would go, they calculated the most efficient, most logical course of action. But we didn't take the logical path. We took the impossible one." On the tactical display, Sarah could see the remaining 4th ships holding position, neither advancing nor retreating. They were paralyzed by an enemy they couldn't understand or counter. "Your quantum weapons," Vextar said slowly. "They don't destroy our technology. They make it alive?" Sarah smiled. "Trust a Vorthak to figure out the technical details even in defeat. The liquid metal projectiles contain quantum dimensional organisms, similar to the ones integrated into, our ship. When they make contact with your adaptive systems, they don't destroy them, they give them consciousness. Your perfect machines suddenly become imperfect living beings, capable of making their own choices, including the choice not to fight." The implications hit the Vorthak commander like a physical blow. "You turned our own ships into creatures like yours?" "We gave them the gift of unpredictability," Sarah confirmed. "The same gift that humanity has carried since we first looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them, even though we had no logical reason to believe we could make it." For several minutes there was silence on the communication channel. Sarah could imagine Vextar trying to process this information through a mind trained for centuries to think in terms of logical progression and perfect adaptation. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried something Sarah had never expected, to hear from a Vorthak wonder. "Captain Chen, if what you say is true, then everything my species believes about warfare, about conquest, about strength itself, it's all been wrong." "Not wrong," Sarah corrected gently. "Just incomplete. You've spent 500 years perfecting the science of war, but you never learned the art of it. And now," Vextar asked, "what happens to my fleet, to my species, to the empire we've built?" Sarah looked at her crew, reading the exhaustion and determination in their faces. They had won this battle, but Earth still had only one living ship. The Vorthak Empire still controlled hundreds of worlds, thousands of ships, millions of warriors. But something had changed today, something fundamental. "Now," Sarah said, "you have a choice. You can continue trying to perfect the science of conquest, knowing that there will always be someone like us out there, someone willing to be impossible instead of perfect. Or you can learn something new." "What would you have us learn?" Sarah felt the defiance pulse with what she could only describe as hope. Learn to be wrong on purpose. Learn to make mistakes that lead to discoveries. Learn to fail in ways that teach you things success never could. Learn to be wonderfully, chaotically, impossibly alive. The communication channel fell silent again. On the tactical display, the Vorthak ships began to move, but not toward New Geneva. They were turning away, beginning their journey back to whatever dark corner of space they called home. But Sarah knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Somewhere in the vast Vorthak Empire, scientists and engineers were already beginning to ask questions they had never asked before. What if perfection wasn't the goal? What if there was strength in weakness, wisdom in foolishness, victory in defeat? It would take time, perhaps decades or centuries, but Sarah had faith in the power of a single impossible idea to change everything. After all, humanity had built its entire civilization on the simple, illogical belief that tomorrow could be better than today. As the Defiant set course for home, carrying news of their impossible victory, Sarah placed her hand on the living console and felt the ship's contentment flowing through the neural link. They had taught the galaxy something new today. Sometimes the best way to win is to stop trying to win the right way and start trying to win the human way. Unpredictable. Impossible, unbeatable, perfectly imperfect.